Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Big Bang, see also cosmology, see also time travel. Contact Report 134.
Do you know what really happened in the Big Bang? I mean about whether or not all building blocks already existed in the tiny energy flea from which the original explosion of the universe, the creation arose? Or is it possible that all elements formed only after the Big Bang? How many elements, that is to say basic building blocks, were concentrated and where?
There are 280 raw materials, or basic elements, and these were already contained in the tiny original core from which the Big Bang developed. The elements did not form only after the explosion, but were already existent before in the tiny core, which we call energy fetching. To repeat, as you understand absolutely correctly, the basic building blocks of original material consisting of 280 elements, which were the basis for all later matter and today's universe, were included in the energy fetching, which was the original core of all that exists in today's universe and all its dimensions. Of course, all of the fine material elements were also equally included in the original core, the energy fetching. The original generation of the universe resulted from an idea of the original creation, which created the original core, just a flea-sized product full of energy that was created out of a consciousness form by itself, and that accumulated its energy and evolved in strength. In the balance of the accumulation of energy and strength, there originated all 280 basic elements and, with these, the energy fetching, in which an immense pressure and a temperature of millions of degrees developed, causing the original explosion of the universe, the Big Bang, as this process is called by you.
Contact Report 143.
The universe is divided into 7 units. That is to say, rings or belts that, entirely together, form the whole universe. And all of these rings are rotating against each other and have different diameters and an ovoid shape. These 7 rings, which we call belts, are the following: 1 central core, 2 core belt, 3 space belt, 4 solid state matter universe belt, 5 transformation belt, 6 creation belt, and 7 displacement belt. And we also call the creation belt the creation matter belt, or the expansion belt, and the displacement belt, the last and extreme, embodies, according to your sense, a bumper belt. Note, a diagram accompanying this explanation can be seen here. In the interior center of the universe is the real core, which grows with each fallback of the creation. So of the whole universe, doubling itself in size. Thus, the core will be twice as large with the next fallback as it is today. From this core, referring to the energy field resting in the space belt, which is the fallen back creation, new energies form for the renewed expansion to the next universe, whereby at the end of the slumber time, a new Big Bang takes place and a new expansion creates a new universe. Generally, all things of a much more refined form, which means that all coarse material will not be so stable anymore as in this universe. The space belt itself is that part of the universe from which the expansion of the creation occurs, in which the creation energy also slumbers and, on the other hand, after every fallback, develops itself and takes up new fundamental forces from the core just to expand again through a renewed Big Bang. Of course, the dimension of the space belt also grows from fallback to fallback because through every expansion of the universe and through the associated unchangeable effects and the extreme expansion that again follows contraction, The mass of the entire creation grows, always doubling itself in size. So thus, it becomes evident from this that in the becoming and passing of the universe, a cycle of Big Bang expansion, contraction, Big Bang expansion, etc. is arranged.
Contact Report 219.
During the formation of the universe, the greatest brightness was given, a beaming, bright, white Zohar light that resulted from the Big Bang explosion. Then came the blue phase of the galaxy's development and stars' development, etc., from which the material form of the present universe developed, which exhibits a beige color that, over the course of time and evolutionary change, will be followed by the colors of turquoise, green, red, and yellow. So since the origin of the universe, there is the following series of colors up to its end. 1. Beaming, bright, white Zohar light Big Bang phase 2, beaming blue. Existence development phase 3, beige first existence phase 4, turquoise second existence phase 5, green third existence phase 6, red final existence phase 7, yellow contraction phase.
Contact Report 228.
Our astronomical scientists continue to stubbornly claim that our universe is only just 8 to 15 billion, 8,000 to 15,000 years old. They have no idea that the visible universe is only one of 7 universe belts. They have no idea whatsoever about our material universe belt in which we exist materially. While on the inside and outside of our visible material universe belt, there are 6 other and more subtle belts. Also, our scientists have no idea that the total universe is a double spiral and egg-shaped creation, etc. The total universe, with an age of about 46 trillion years, calculated from the Big Bang until today, is expanding until the time of 5,155,500,000 years, only to collapse again through a contraction. During its expansion, the matter belt, or our visible universe, is constantly renewed by a seemingly endless process of change and thus always remains young. The oldest matter that you have found is almost 40 billion 40,000 years old, while we here on Earth have not yet come into possession of any such matter, and therefore our scientists are also living in erroneous assumptions. Now, after my long speech, my question is when, after the creation of the matter belt, or our visible material universe, the first celestial bodies were formed. In my opinion, this process should have happened very quickly.
This is unknown to us, and besides, your question cannot be answered in this wise either. You have to assume that the last great process of change and renewal of the material universe, that is to say, our visible material universe, took place approximately 17 billion 17,000 years ago. In the process, new stars formed again in the inner of the outer, areas of the material universe belt, not in the outermost of the direct transformation area, at a distance of about 14 billion 14,000 light years from the SOL system, which began to radiate and shine after about 187 million years of the last great transformation process. And these stars will also be discovered by terrestrial astronomical scientists in the coming decades. Only they will unfortunately, as so often before, draw the wrong conclusions from them again.
And how do these celestial bodies in the transformation belt come into being, if I may ask?
That does not fall under secrecy. The new matter that is created during the renewal or change condenses under the powerful universal force of gravity and forms the celestial bodies by compressing the mass, which then condense and develop their own heat-powerful life.
Easy to say, but surely a process that takes many millions of years. But that brings me to my next question. Is it possible to determine the mass of matter in our visible material universe if you completely exclude the other 6 belts?
It would be unscientific and arrogant to try to do this, because the entire expanse of our universe is so vast and involved in constant change that it is impossible to calculate exactly.
We know, after all, that the total universe does not expand forever, but only expands until the time of 155.5 trillion years, and then succumbs to contraction. During the expansion process of the entire universe, the visible material universe also becomes larger and larger, if I look at the whole thing correctly. And since this must be the case, there must also be different temperatures in our universe, because I assume that heat and cold must be generated by the constant change movement. Am I correct in my assumption?
That is of correctness. Although the temperature fluctuations are universe-wide and very minimal, they occur mainly in those parts of our material universe where the uninterrupted change through the outer immaterial belts takes place. This is what we call the transitionless open change zone.
This transformation zone does produce a rushing sound, as Ptah taught me on the Great Journey. I was also allowed to hear it through the technical devices in the giant spacecraft. It was simply gigantic. Ptah explained to me that the Earthlings call this phenomenon cosmic background radiation and assume that the Big Bang took place there in that zone, and that the universe also ended there.
Which does not correspond to correctness, as you know.
Of course, because that is where the actual total universe begins with its other 6 immeasurable belts. Ptah also said that the differences in temperature are actually very small and therefore only subject to tiny fluctuations caused by differences in density in all regions of our material universe.
Contact Report 246.
When creation was created by the Big Bang, it must have been that the explosion speed was much higher than just 147 times the speed of light. In my opinion, the first velocity, the center explosion expansion speed, if I may call it that, must have been the speed of creation and 10,7,000 times the speed of light. Otherwise, it would not have been possible that the enormous vastness of the universe could have come into being. That's right, isn't it?
Of course.
Of course. Really can't be any different. But how long did this speed last? In my opinion, it must have been just 1 second, or even just 1 nanomoment. Because if I consider that creation is able to cross the whole universe with one thought due to its 10,7,000-fold speed of light practically in a nanomoment, or even in no decompression time, if I may call it that, then my assumption should actually apply. It should be noted, however, that the explosion started from a center and spread ovoidally, so that the nanomoment for 107,000 times the speed of light only applies to the radius, while in reality the double expansion must be measured from the center, because during the nanomoment the universe spread ovoidally to all sides, so a nanomoment to all sides in an ovoid frame. I am glad that I was right in my considerations, which unfortunately cannot be said of earthly astronomers, who still claim that the universe is only 1820 billion 18,000 to 20,000 years old, and that they have advanced to the ends of the universe with their research. All of them have no idea that the universe is divided into 7 belts, and that they are so far-reaching that they can never explore them with their primitive means. So they also do not know that they can only make their observations and do their researches in the belt of matter, which of course has certain limits and to which it is very possible to reach, but not yet for the terrestrial human being, because nevertheless these limits are still far too far away for them to be grasped and gleaned from Earth by apparatus or instrument, etc.
Contact Report 250.
The astronomy science of the terrestrial humans is only given in the beginnings, and therefore still extremely unsatisfactory. Consequently, scientists also lack the basic knowledge of the structure of the universe, and thus also the knowledge that the universe consists of 7 different belts, which have a total age of just over 46 trillion years, calculated since the Big Bang. So astronomy scientists also lack the knowledge that the material universe, the material belt, is only one of 7 belts that make up the universe as a whole. Also missing is all knowledge about the fact that the material belt, the material universe, is classified as a continuous becoming and decay, and thus nothing is of infinite permanence. All universal objects and forms of life of the material belt, the material universe, become and disappear in permanent succession and become a recurrence and reoccurrence, entirely according to the universal causality, and thus according to the law of cause and effect, which classifies all existences of every form of the coarse and fine material as well as everything of the superfine material of the spiritual and its energies. Thus is also the material belt, the material universe, classified to a steady becoming and passing away, whereby no aging occurs, but a steady youthfulness remains until the time when the contraction occurs, thus the contraction of the universe again. This ensures that the entire universe, and thus also the material universe, is kept young, evolutionary, and creative from the moment of the first moment of expansion to the moment of contraction in constant succession, and thus does not deteriorate due to aging. Thus, the universe will probably become older in years and time, but there will be no aging process in the sense that something will become outdated and thus unstable and unevolved. Exactly the opposite is the case, because through the causal becoming and passing away, the old is transformed into the passing and the new. However, only the state forms change, whereby no annihilation or destruction takes place, but only a transformation from which something new results from the old. Thus, the material universe will be kept young in permanent succession in its entire extension, which is much larger than earthly astronomers have been able to fathom until today. Unfortunately, however, they will indulge in very long, still wrong ideas, suppositions, and assumptions in this relationship, as they also still assume wrong conditions in this respect for a long time. They are also very self-opinionated, and they are subject to a narrow-mindedness that has something to do with megalomania and autocracy.
The constant process of renewal is also the reason why, as a rule, only young matter can be found that is between 4 and 6 billion, 4,000,000,000, and 6,000,000,000 years old, at least as it is here on the Earth, while you said that you have pieces of matter that are almost 40 billion years old. You have taught me that the expansion of the universe has continued since the Big Bang, and continues until contraction sets in. While in the outermost universe belt, in the so-called Ram belt, the expansion speed actually remains constant. It continuously decreases in the material belt or material universe in a certain half-life period, as is also the case with the speed of light. Just as the entire 7-belt universe expands, so too do all galaxies expand in themselves, while at the same time they are also assigned to an escape velocity through which the galaxies push outward, namely to the outer edge of the material belt or material universe. At the same time, they are classified as an incessant process of becoming and decaying, whereby they can only exist for a certain number of billions of years before they are transformed back into gases from which new galaxies, stars and planets, etc. emerge. The existence of a galaxy is between 12 and 40 billion, 40,000 years, depending on what kind of galaxy or other entity it is and what cosmic events occur around it. At the edge of the material universe towards the inner belt, that is to say towards the core belt, energies arise from the inner belt area, which penetrate outwards into the material belt and thus into the material universe, in which everything then becomes compressed and becomes new coarse matter. This oldest originated original energy or original matter is to be calculated with an age of approximately 46 trillion, 46,000 years. Exactly this time as the universe is old. But since this ancient matter is classified in a constant change of becoming and passing away, it transforms again and again back into the pure form of energy, out of which it then becomes condensed again and becomes coarse matter. Thus it results that no coarse matter can be found in the material universe that is older than about 40,040,000,000 years. And so it also happens that the first-order energy of a galaxy, a star, a nebula, or a planet, etc., is hundreds of millions or even billions of years older than the material structures themselves. As for example, at Earth it's the case. First-order energy came up already some 646,646,000 years ago, while Earth by itself was condensed some 46 billion years ago by still liquid materia of half-gas-like kind, while real solid planet was existing only 4 to 6 billion 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. First-order energy, from which Earth originated, is younger than first-order energy, that is to say, first-order matter of our Milky Way, because first-order energy, from which Earth originated, drove through space with high flight speed and was then captured by our galaxy, hundreds of billions of years after, when this first-order energy from inner belt entered our material universe. And when our astronomy scientists search for the Big Bang, they can never find it, of course, because on the outer side of the material universe, they only come across the next belt, which does not contain any matter of a coarse material form, and into which they are unable to penetrate with all their instruments, as is the case on the inner side of the material universe, where they can only penetrate to the inner belt. Scientists will not be able to penetrate up to the actual universe core, that is to say, creation core, at all, if they will not be able to recognize its radiation and oscillation, etc. What they can recognize and grasp in this respect are only the oscillations and radiations of the outer and inner material universe belt, and thus the two universe belts, which enclose the material universe outside and inside. It has to be said that the black holes also explode again when they are compressed enough, from which new galaxies, nebulae, stars, and planets arise. These black holes are gigantically large in relation to the original Big Bang mass, because in the Big Bang, the total mass of the explosion site was not larger than a flea, as explained by Genesis. Note: this may be referring to a book by that title published by Figu. While a black hole in compressed form can have entire planetary or solar dimensions. It is also interesting to mention that in the free world space, so-called electromagnetic space currents predominate, as you have explained to me, so there are enormous magnetic fields, as well as a factor according to which one can divide the world space into a north and a south gradient, so to speak. This also results in the fact that the galaxies, etc., rotate both in the right and in the left direction, that is to say, clockwise or counterclockwise. And once again, I have to say that people from Earth, etc., are never able to penetrate to the edge or into the core of the universe, even with their best telescopes and other devices and apparatuses, but always only straight to the inner or outer borders of the material belt or the material universe, where the inner and outer belt form insurmountable barriers for distant observations of all kinds.
There is no mistake in your explanations.
Contact Report 503.
One more question. Ever since I was a boy, I have come across the fact that some scientists and draftsmen depict the Big Bang in such a way that the big explosion only extends to one side, that is to say, funnel-shaped. Even as a small boy, I talked about this with your father Svath and told him that it could not correspond to reality, because I noticed something different when I was blown up, when I was allowed to work with my father at that time and had my first blasting experiences, when we blew up tree stumps and crushed them in this way. My father was an expert in this and very responsible, because he was also a minor in the military during the Second World War on the Swiss-German border. So he knew the job of blasting inside out, and since I was already interested in this craft at that time, I consulted with him whether I could learn from him. And since I was already a student of blasting techniques at the age of 6, my father allowed me to work and learn with him and also to experiment with black powder. For example, by hanging small explosive packages on strings from beanstalks rammed into the ground at an angle and making them explode. I found out that the explosion was not funnel-shaped, but circular and spherical, which is what I told your father, and I also told him that the universe, respectively, the creation of universal consciousness at the Big Bang, must have been created in the same way by a circular explosion, which he confirmed to me. My question should actually be whether you are aware of anything other than the fact that explosions have an all-round effect. This is also the case when there is a celebration on one side of an explosion. Such a solidity prevents the explosion from spreading all around and from having an outward effect only where everything is free.
It is not known to us other than what you also know in this respect. So if, for example, the Big Bang is represented funnel-shaped, as you say and as this journal drawing shows here, then this is fundamentally wrong, because the Big Bang has spread as it is not possible otherwise, at the one hand circularly and at the other hand in almost spherical form respectively as an egg-shaped structure.
Contact Report 521.
Some researchers suspect that there really are many universes, and that a so-called Big Bang has taken place in each one of them, which is in line with the facts. But scientists are not yet ready to know that new universes will continue to be created endlessly. They also suspect that the individual universes, which they compare with bubbles respectively with soap bubbles, deviate from our Dern universe with regard to the laws of nature, so that there must be universes without stars. Of course they are right, except that in the fine and ultrafine energetic universes, there are no laws of nature. But according to your explanation, there are only fine and ultrafine energetic laws, so that in such universes there can be no matter belts and no galaxies, suns, planets, meteors and comets, etc. But it is well known that there is still a great deal that our scientists do not know, which is why they have to keep revising. Today they do not even know that our Dern universe, like every other universe, also consists of 7 different egg-shaped respectively oval belts, and that in our universe, the 4th belt alone represents the material part of the universe. They also do not know that all galaxies move in such a way that they move towards a certain point in the material universe, where a constant change takes place and where matter renews itself. So the matter belt experiences a complete renewal in the course of 49,049,000,000 years.
The research of earthly scientists is still based on pure assumptions and not on actual knowledge.
I know that, but I still find it narrow-minded.
Contact Report 528.
But one more question about the 7th belt of the universe, which we call the Ram Belt. As I know from Nocademian's memory bank, this ramming does not mean the actual force by which other universes are pushed aside. If I have understood correctly, the pile-driving belt correctly embodies a shock wave which hits the shock waves of other universes and thus causes a smooth movement of them. This in turn causes a mass movement in the entire stock of all 1049 forms of universes, in that all the universes that exist for us human beings in infinite numbers are constantly moving. Further, I understand that only after the Ram belt, respectively, the shock wave, the full force of the 6th belt follows, which is then the actual shock wave and which causes the displacement of the other universes, whereby these diverge further apart, so that there is enough space for every new and for every other already existing universe. The 5th energetic positive and the 3rd energetic negative belt, I have understood, are so-called energy conversion belts, as Nocademian calls them, which together with their negative and positive energies nourish the 4th belt between them. In this 4th belt, all 280 elements existing in the universe are formed by the interaction of the 2 belts. Out of these elements develop the gaseous forms: electrons, neutrons, neutrinos, protons, photons, nucleons, radiations, nebulae, molecules, as well as all kinds of atoms and subatoms of all kinds, such as quarks and what they are all called, which develop up to the 7-fold level below the actual atom, respectively, what is called indivisible, from which in one form or another solid forms of matter and biological life, etc., ultimately result. The core of the universe, which is considered to be the first belt, is the actual source of creation, from which the universal spirit energy develops into highly concentrated form, resulting in the explosion we call the Big Bang. The second belt is the one that forms the corona of the explosion, where the expansion energy unfolds its full force, and at the same time develops an increase in volume, causing the outer region of the universe to expand at 147 times the speed of light. In the third belt, negatively charged spirit energetic basic substances are created, while in the fifth belt, positively charged spirit energetic basic substances are created equally, which penetrate into the fourth belt located between the third and fifth belt. And as I have understood in this context, the basic spiritual energetic substances from the third and fifth belts together penetrate directly into the fourth belt for 155.5 trillion 155,500,000 years, in which the interaction of the negative and positive energies also begins and progresses. The positive and negative spiritual energetic impulses which united in the fourth belt, which was still empty at the beginning, triggered the developmental process in relation to the emergence of the most diverse forms of matter and the manifold biological life forms, etc., thus forming the material universe with all its reality, and the planes and forms, etc., existing in it. After 155.5 trillion 155,500,000 years of expansion of the universe, its contraction then occurs, with which also the basic supply of the fourth belt respectively. The material universe through the negative third and the positive fifth belt ceases. After the 155.5 trillion years of contraction, the waking period of the creation of universal consciousness is over after a total time of 311 trillion and 40,040,000,000 years, with which the material universe also ceases to exist. The following time after the slumbering period of creation universal consciousness respectively, after the resting phase of the contracted universe lasts 7x 311 trillion 311,000 and 40,040,000 years, during which completely new energies arise. These are compressed unimaginably enormously, after which they are released again after 2 quadrillion, 177 trillion and 280 billion years, 2,177,280,000, by a new enormous explosion, respectively by a Big Bang, whereby a new universe is created. This is then, however, only of a purely energetic nature, and no longer has a material belt, or a material universe respectively.
This is also known to us for quite some time because we also found corresponding records from my father Sfath, which he left us, but which only recently became accessible to us. Apparently, my father had found a way to find these data.
Contact Report 707 Note. This contact report contains a lengthy summary of the origin, composition, and evolution of the universe, of which only small segments related to the Big Bang are reproduced here.
At the Big Bang, that is to say at the emergence, that is to say at the becoming of creation, that is to say creation universal consciousness, the creation structure emerged as 7 basic levels, namely in the form of 7 expanding spirit energy belts, whereby the fourth belt manifested materially through the interaction of the third and fifth belt. Consequently, therefore, the material belt emerged, in which flakes, nebulae, and finally galaxies, suns, planets, and life, etc., were formed. Creation can be thought of as an example of an egg-like spiritual energy shell, which floats in the boundless and timeless super-ultra-infinity immeasurability infinite spaciousness of the absolute nothingness, along with countless other creations of the same or, according to the state of evolution, differently higher kind. This creation structure thus contains within itself 7 different spirit energy belts, levels, or 7 different dimensions or space-time structures simile, balloons, which all arose simultaneously at the Big Bang, but are absolutely independent of each other. After the becoming of the compression of the spirit energy swinging waves in the nothing vacuum, and the duration of time that arose with it, A further compression took place during 3 time nanos, namely up to the ever very first, and at the same time very last, nothing vacuum Big Bang, which led to the very first and last self-exciting creation and existence of the being absolutum, which created the 6 further absolutum forms, all absolutum creations. That is to say, absolutum universes, that is to say, absolutum forms, that is to say, absolutum planes, were created only once by the permanent C-in, being or energy, and permanent C-in, being or power, of the being absolutum, while this itself emerged in a self-exciting way from the nothing vacuum by the very first Big Bang.
A long speech and good explanations of the facts, to which much more could be said, but the whole thing would fill books. So your explanations are quite sufficient when they are done.
Contact Report 750.
Well, over time, scientists also talk nonsense or fantasize nonsense, so also with regard to astronomy, because the entire astronomy science has no idea whatsoever about how and what the universe actually is. So they also do not know that everything visible from the Earth, all the stars, etc., corresponds to only 1/7 of the space-time structure universe. Just as this space-time structure universe only makes up 1/7 of the entire space of creation, which has a lifespan, starting from the so-called Big Bang to the end of the final contraction, of 311 trillion Earth years. Nor do they have any idea of how the real, universal, and creation-related laws behave, as also in relation to the emergence and behavior of the dimensions and all the trimmings with regard to the creative, and that everything is completely different from what is assumed or claimed, and that the creation is delusionally referred to as God and God the Father, as Allah, Theos, Parameshvar, Shiva, Choda, Shen or Kami, etc., corresponds to nothing but a pathologically insane conceit that is endlessly far from any truth.
Contact Report 823.
Very many of our scientists, airheads, I farewell to say, to which also various normal people belong, do not understand that the Earth, in the humanly incomprehensible infinity of our creation, which is only a 7th part of all universes of creation, is not alone inseminated and carries life, and partly also more highly intelligent life than exists on our planet, and that our creation consists of 7 universes, each with a matter belt, has not yet been grasped by all those schoolboys who want to know so much about the universe, whose effective number is 7, which in turn are arranged in dimensions of the past and the future. They do know that the matter belt with all its galaxies, etc., is expanding more and more, but in truth they do not even know that the origin of creation with its 7 universes was tiny, smaller than an atom when it exploded through the so-called Big Bang. But they only assume, that is to say, suspect it, but do not know how this tiny thing came into being, from which creation with its 7 universes emerged through the Big Bang. Let alone that they have any idea that what they call the universe is nothing else than the 7th part of the creation, but not the product of an imaginary God or God creator, etc. In truth, they do not even have an idea of the development of the whole. Consequently, the origin out of the nihilo, out of which all the beginning of all existence found its becoming, is a book with 7 seals to them, which they will not be able to open for a very long time.
Contact Report 826.
In the beginning there was the so-called Big Bang, whereby our creation, that is to say our universe, came into being from an infinitely tiny point, whereby I have endeavored to describe the preliminary process up to that point in my book, Ursprung.